In a dark room, a girl's voice rings out from a small, lit-up device. She cheerfully introduces herself as Amasaki Nina, a new streamer. She thanks her audience for coming to her very first live stream. There are 102 people watching in the chat. The first comment comes from Pepper, saying they were really looking forward to her stream. The comment below praises her cute voice. The last two comments ask what she'll do during the stream and mention that a lot of new VTubers have been appearing lately, saturating the market. The boy, sitting under a blanket in a room lit only by the small screen, taps on her screen. Another new comment comes from Ao, who says this is the first time he's seen a stream like this and that he'll be supporting her from now on. He asks Nina to do her best for the stream. Nina lets out a small gasp of surprise when she sees a donation from Ao's. She asks if he happened to find her live stream by chance among so many others. She happily expresses her joy and thanks him for finding her. He says quietly that he likes her. That day, he fell for her. At the store, people gossip, asking each other if anyone knows him. He just stands in front of the counter, while another person replies that it's Miyaki. And they heard he used to be a programmer at a big company. The other person curiously asks why he's working at a convenience store now. The other person replies that apparently, Miyaki was dumped by his fiancée, and the shock caused him psychological trauma. They comment that it seems young people these days can't work when their hearts are broken. Miyaki looks at the staff-only sign on the door where the noise is coming from. The other person asks where they heard that from. They reply that their niece's boyfriend worked at the same company as Miyaki. The other person continues, "This kid is already 27 years old. It's a shame for his parents that he's still single and just working a part-time job at his age." Miyaki quietly recognizes them as Suzuki and Sato from the early morning religious service. He wonders to himself, couldn't they at least wait until I'm home to talk about me? He hangs his head and thinks to himself that it's all true. The girl who broke up with him after 4 years of dating was his senior at the company. It became a rumor, and he always felt like everyone was laughing at him. His mental state got worse and worse, and he quit his job on his doctor's recommendation. He could no longer handle daily life, let alone work. He was living among bags of trash until he met her. Suddenly, a loud voice calls his name. Miyaki recognizes the shop owner, an old woman with a beaming, toothless smile. She says to him, "Look, this is what you've been waiting for, right?" She holds out a box with a poster of several girls with cat ears on their foreheads. Miyaki asks if he can draw one. The owner cheerfully says his shift is about to end, so he should go right ahead. He draws a ticket with a QR code and instructions attached. His prize is a Tanpopo Akari rubber strap. The owner enthusiastically asks if that's the girl Miyaki likes. He replies that it's not her, and that he doesn't know her very well. He says the one he likes is Amasaki Nina, a VTuber who just debuted this year. With her cheerful, natural way of talking, Nina has become very beloved. Her popularity is constantly growing on social media. As for Miyaki, it was thanks to her that he recovered enough to be able to work part-time again. He looks at the keychain in his hand, which features a chubby drawing of her. In the end, he kept drawing lots until Nina's prize appeared. Even though he had already spent all his money for the month, he still has to pay his rent. He figures he'll probably postpone paying the water bill. He walks past a park. He sees her and thinks, that girl is here again today. A girl with long hair is sitting on a stone bench. He wonders if she's a student and why she's here during the day instead of at school. He jokes to himself that maybe she's a runaway. The girl turns her head towards where he was standing just a few moments ago, but he has already hurried away. He breathes a sigh of relief, thinking he got away. If he accidentally made eye contact with a young girl like that, he'd definitely be mistaken for a pervert. Even though he doesn't have any ill intentions, he knows that in the eyes of others, he'd be found guilty even if he did nothing wrong. He remembers the feeling of people looking at him with malicious smiles. Suddenly, a sweet female voice calls out to him from behind. He turns around with a weary expression and is met with familiar, sparkling eyes and a smile with a small fang. The girl holds out the Nina keychain in her hand and says he dropped it. He panics the moment he sees her, thinking this is a terrible situation. She playfully asks him if it's wrong that she's the one who picked it up. He stammers that it's his and apologizes for troubling her. Then he thanks her and hurries away. The girl watches him run off, looking confused. He wonders if she realized he had been watching her. If that's the case, then this situation is even worse. When he gets to his front door, he fumbles in his pocket for his key. After standing in front of the door for a long time, he worried that he had lost his key. Taking out his phone, he decided to call the property management company, but of course, his phone was dead. A familiar voice called out from behind. She asked if he was in trouble. He turned around and saw her standing just outside the wall of his apartment. She looked at him curiously, while he looked back at her with a worried expression. They both sat on a bench by the roadside as he called for help with his apartment situation. He handed the phone back and thanked her, not daring to look her in the eyes. She told him it was nothing and took her phone back. He mumbled a quiet goodbye and was about to leave, but she called him back, asking if he was leaving right away. She pointed out that he still had time before the person from property management arrived. She suggested he stay and keep her company. He turned to look at her, but immediately looked away, flustered. Seeing that he still hadn't moved, she told him he should do it as a way of thanking her for letting him use her phone. Finally, he sat down and mentioned that she'd been showing up in the area quite often lately. Taking the opportunity, he asked if she had run away from home. She replied that he guessed right, that she'd had a fight with her parents. He thought to himself, based on this, it seems she doesn't realize I've seen her before. What a relief. She explained that at first, she was just killing time at internet cafes or karaoke bars, but by evening, those places all got too noisy. Then she turned to him and said, instead of talking about that, she called him Oni-san and asked if he liked VTubers. He got flustered when she brought that up, saying that the rubber keychain from earlier was part of the number 100 lottery series that had just been released today. She teased him, saying he looked like the type who'd be into anime and stuff like that. He replied that he actually didn't watch much anime. Surprised, she asked if that was really true. He said that he didn't know much about VTubers either, except for the girl on this rubber keychain. He said that the girl's name is Nina. He said Nina is special. He went on to say that he used to date someone. He respected her because she was his senior colleague at the company. He tried to work hard to become someone worthy of her, but in the end, she betrayed him. She had an affair with a superior at the company, and they broke up. The next day, when he went to work, rumors about the affair had spread everywhere, but the story was twisted around. Everyone was saying that he was the one who had cheated on her and hurt her. He explained that even though he tried to explain the truth, no one believed him. They all said that his senpai was betrayed by him, and that he was definitely the one who hurt her. The rumor spread that Miyaki had cheated on and hurt his senpai. He said that ever since the breakup, so many things in his life had fallen apart, including his job, all because she left him. Then he quickly apologized for telling such a dark story, but she told him it was okay. His cheeks flushed, and he wondered why talking to her made him feel so at ease. He continued, saying that around that time, he had watched one of Nina's live streams. Seeing her having fun and working hard, even when being criticized by negative comments, gave him motivation. Thanks to that, he was recently able to start working part-time. Maybe he would have felt the same way about other streamers, but since the one who saved him back then was Nina, she's special to him. He said that even so, he's still afraid of interacting with people. He called himself a gloomy hikikomori type, who usually avoids society. He stared at the keychain in his hand with a fond look and said that he thinks it would be great if one day he could smile brightly in front of everyone, just like Nina does now. He's working part-time at a convenience store now, but if he could become like that, he feels like he'd be able to take on a job like he had before and give it his all one more time. The girl looked at him sadly, but still encouraged him, saying that he could definitely do it. He lowered his head, smiled, and said he really hopes so. He said that someone like him was pathetic. He thought that streaming was just a form of entertainment, not something worth being saved by. But she interrupted him and said that it's not just playing around. He looked at her, puzzled. She continued, saying that she thinks there are many streamers with different views. However, there are also people who are seriously treating streaming as a real job. She said that streamers are always thinking about their streamed content so they can enjoy it with their audience. They even worry about building a character image that doesn't overlap with other personas. They do it out of passion, but because they are all taking it seriously, she advised him not to say they're just playing around. He was about to say something, but was cut off. When a voice announced they were from the Mini Home Building Management Company, he quickly bowed, thanking her for everything, and hurried away. The manager gave him a replacement key and told him to be more careful from now on. Standing in front of his door, he thought about how the girl from earlier seemed a little angry during their conversation. He unlocked the door, telling himself that he was definitely not good at talking to girls in real life. As the door swung open, his messy apartment came into view. Exhausted, he flopped onto his bed, where his body pillow with Nina printed on it lay. With Nina, he wouldn't feel like this. He figured that if he were with Nina, he would just watch a stream and leave a comment. Sometimes, Nina would reply to one of his comments, and that would be all. He recalled the text message saying they had broken up, and how she had expected more from him, only to be disappointed. He thought that in real life, he wouldn't have been hurt by such little things. Night fell, and he woke up while hugging the Nina pillow. He thought about how he must have slept in a weird position and felt uncomfortable. His stomach growled, making him pause for a moment. On his way back with a bag of food in his hand, he suddenly thought about the girl from before. It's so late. He looked toward the familiar park and told himself she probably wasn't there anymore. But then he saw her. He started looking around, not knowing what to do. He remembered that he needed to thank her for her help earlier, but also remembered that she seemed angry at the end of their conversation. He wondered if it would be better not to bother her again. But then he saw a man approaching her, and he realized with concern that she wasn't alone, and the man seemed to be scolding her. He figured they were probably arguing and looked down, forcing a smile, deciding it was best not to interfere. But then the girl turned her head towards him and called out that he was here and that she'd been waiting for him. She waved enthusiastically and said he was late. He wondered if she was really saying all that to him. Then she turned back to the man behind her, flashed him a victory sign, and said that this was her boyfriend. So she would be leaving now, but the man wasn't having it. He put his hand on her shoulder and snapped that there was no way that guy was her boyfriend. Annoyed, she asked what he was doing, but instead of letting go, he told her not to try and run away and to come with him. Miyaki witnessed it all from a distance. The girl demanded he let her go, but the man said she had nowhere to go and that he was only saying this for her own good. She replied that she already told him she'd handle it herself. He turned away, hesitating, thinking now was the time to act while they were distracted. Miyaki wondered if it was really okay to leave like this, as he heard them continue to argue. He thought bitterly that in the end, he was just running away from things he didn't like, as always. She had actually listened to the words of someone like him and had responded that way. He remembered when he told her he thought it would be great if one day he could smile cheerfully in front of everyone, just like Nina. She had told him that he definitely could. That made him stop in his tracks. He clenched his fists and said loudly to the man that he thought she really seemed to hate what he was doing. But the man stubbornly replied that of course that wasn't the case. Miyaki said that was clearly what was happening here. The man angrily grabbed Miyaki by the collar, asking what he had just said. Miyaki awkwardly held his hands up, saying he wasn't the one who said it. The man told him he was being a nuisance and asked what he was trying to accomplish here. Miyaki finally blurted out that getting beaten up by strong-looking guys was his fetish. He said he just happened to see the man while passing by and really wanted to get hit. He spread his arms wide while the man stammered, asking what he was talking about. Miyaki told him to hurry up and hit him, begging him for it. The man, weirded out by this, yelled at Miyaki to stop and not come any closer. Finally, he threw Miyaki to the ground, yelling at him to stay away. Miyaki cried out in pain and watched the man walk away, thinking he'd chased him off. He felt pathetic. The girl worriedly asked him if he was all right and explained that the man had started talking to her out of nowhere. She apologized for dragging him into this mess, but Miyaki said he was the one who should be apologizing. She looked at him and asked if something had happened earlier. He said that he thought he might have made her uncomfortable before. She said that wasn't it, but he insisted he should be the one to apologize. Suddenly, she told him she was going to stay at his place because she was scared the other guy might come back. That made him pause, stammering that it might be a bit much. The girl smiled apologetically, took out her phone, and said she was just guessing. He wondered if she was messing with him. She said in all honesty that she was glad he was there at that moment. She said she was in trouble, and it was dark. She was so happy to see him because she thought no one would find her. She thanked him with a wide, bright smile. His eyes widened, and he told himself that he couldn't have imagined this happening. He wondered why he hadn't realized it sooner. That in real life, he would fall for her too. His face flushed as he whispered that she was Amasaki Nina. She tilted her head in confusion as he said she was Amasaki Nina. She asked why he thought she was Nina, making him wonder what he was even saying. He thought there was no way he'd meet the person behind Nina in a place like this. He stammered that it was because of her voice. She touched her chin as he continued. Maybe it was the way she talked. And besides, she just gave off a similar vibe. She closed her eyes, saying seriously that he'd figured it out quite easily. She said she'd be more careful from now on. He screamed in his mind that he was right. He wondered if she always admitted things so easily. She went on, saying that he was a fan of Nina, so this must have shattered the image he had of her. She apologized for what just happened, while he was still on the floor asking if she wasn't going to deny it. He thought to himself, shouldn't VTubers be more worried about their personal information getting leaked online? She said she wasn't confident enough to hide things skillfully, and she thought being honest was better than telling a bad lie. In return, she asked him not to tell anyone about this. He quickly told her not to worry, and that she could rest assured he wouldn't tell a soul. She crouched down in front of him, letting out a sigh of relief. She held out her hand and said that what happened today would be a secret just between the two of them. She held up her pinky finger and suggested they make a promise. He hooked his pinky around hers, thinking to himself that this gesture was very Nina-like. She whispered, "It's a pinky promise." She turned her back and said she could leave with peace of mind now, but he called out to her, asking if she had run away from home and if she had anywhere to go. She smiled and replied that if she did, she wouldn't be here. She said she would manage on her own. Then she asked him to join one of her streams some other time. He thought that he had really met the person behind Nina. Hearing him stammer, she turned back and looked at him. Finally, he said it could be dangerous to be out at this hour since it was late. He suggested that if she didn't mind, she could stay with him tonight. She nodded, and then she found herself sitting on the floor with a Nina body pillow next to her. She mumbled that he really liked Nina. She looked at the paper in her hand, which was the personal contact information Miyaki had given her. He had said this was his name and contact number, telling her to contact him if anything happened. He also said she was free to use anything in the apartment as she pleased. When she left, she could just leave the door unlocked and go. She had asked him if he was going somewhere. He had scratched his head shyly and said he didn't think she'd be able to relax if he stayed. So he was planning to go to a net cafe, but she told him this was his home, and he didn't need to worry about her. Before leaving, he said it was fine and that he'd be back before noon. She slept on her body pillow and wondered if Miyaki was the right way to read his name. She smiled, thinking that he really was a good person. Miyaki was at an internet and manga cafe. He thought he'd been too eager to invite her to stay at his place, but he wondered if everything would be okay. They weren't there together anyway, so it should be fine. He thought he'd only invited her to stay after finding out she was Nina, and wondered if that made him look bad. But then he thought, since weird guys like that one could be lurking around, he couldn't just leave her alone. He leaned back in his chair, musing that it was a pretty dangerous situation, so he had no choice but to let her stay. Still, he thought maybe it would have been better if he hadn't asked if she was Nina, but that didn't change the fact that Nina was special to him. He closed his eyes, telling himself it wasn't like he wanted to meet the real person behind Nina. So, after she leaves tomorrow, he decided to forget he'd ever met her. After that, he returned to his apartment at 11:32. He stood in front of his door, wondering if she was still there. When he turned the doorknob and realized it was unlocked, he opened the door and saw Nina in the kitchen, her hair in pigtails. She welcomed him home with a warm smile. He asked her why she was still here, reminding her that he'd said this was just a temporary place for one night. She replied that she didn't think it was right to leave right after what he'd done for her. She said that even if she left, she had nowhere to go. But he pointed out that she'd already stayed longer than originally planned. She cut him off, holding out a plate of food to him, and cheerfully suggested they eat together. He asked again, "What is this?" But this time, he was sitting on the floor with her. She explained that it was a dish she'd made by frying up cup noodles and rice. She changed the subject and asked why he didn't have a dining table in his house. He apologized for that and took a spoonful to try. He wondered if this would be like soba and rice cooked together. But then his expression softened as he realized it tasted surprisingly good. She asked if it was good, and he replied that it was actually pretty tasty. She happily said she was glad he liked it, which made him remember it had been a long time since he'd eaten with someone. He felt quite happy about that. Moreover, he wondered how long it had been since someone had welcomed him home. She nervously twiddled her fingers in front of him and said there was something she'd wanted to say since they spoke earlier, after he got home. She called him Ayo-san and asked if, just for a short while, he would let her stay. He immediately spat out his food and asked what she had just called him. She said Ao-san was short for Aoba-san and asked if he didn't like it. He sighed in relief, thinking she had found out his username. She turned her head and asked whose computer that was. He told her it was his. She said she had some free time in the evening, so she'd tried editing the previous live stream into short clips. He asked if it was Nina's live stream. She said he was right, but admitted she wasn't good with computers, so she messed up and couldn't restore it. She wondered if she should hold off on editing the next stream. Hearing that, he cried out and offered to take a look. She didn't object and let him type on his laptop. He asked her if she had messed with the data here. Her eyes widened as she saw him navigate through the data with precision. He brushed back his long hair and asked if he could take a closer look at the data. She let him continue working. And after a moment, he said he'd probably managed to restore the original live stream. She exclaimed that he really did it, and that it was amazing. She said she wanted to insert a thumbnail here. He replied that he understood. He looked at the screen and asked, "How's this?" She asked if he could do that. He replied, "Of course." She mentioned that the audio in another video was badly out of sync. He said that if she wanted to fix it, it would be better to use a better computer. She asked if he couldn't fix it right now. He confirmed he could and told her to wait a moment. She looked at him surprised and wondered if he was actually an incredibly talented person. She asked him if he used to do this kind of work. He looked at her quizzically and said that video editing wasn't his specialty, but he used to be a programmer at his old company. She asked if he knew a lot about this stuff. He replied that he thought he knew a little more than the average person. She told him to wait a moment, then came back, holding 3 thick wads of cash in her hands. He looked at her warily as she told him to take the money. She said it was his fee for the video editing, and that she was paying him. She insisted that she would definitely pay him, then said she wanted him to do other things too. She declared that she wanted to hire him. He told her that she'd said she wanted to hire him, and if it was about editing, she could just ask her company or agency to do it. She mumbled that it wasn't impossible, but explained that things were complicated right now and it would be quite difficult. She said that asking someone she didn't know well was also risky. She said that he already knew about her identity and other things. So she asked him to help her with Nina's live streams. He still looked hesitant, so she said that if he was worried about money, she could pay him in full. She added that there was one other thing she wanted to ask him. She pushed the cash in her hands towards him and asked him to let her stay at his place for a little while. She bowed her head, saying that of course she would pay for rent and living expenses. She pleaded that she was in a tough spot, and if things went on like this, she wouldn't be able to continue live streaming anymore. He said he would address her requests one by one. She immediately perked up and obediently uttered a yes. He began by saying that, first of all, if she was fine with it being him, he didn't mind helping her with the live streams, but he couldn't accept this money. He pushed the money back towards her, saying that this money was probably directly from the income or donation she received from live streaming. He said from the perspective of a fan, one who regularly donates to Nina's streams, he thought it wouldn't be right for someone who wasn't part of the management team to accept that money. So, as a fan of Nina's, he was returning this money to her. She replied that the money wasn't from donations, which made him look at her quizzically. She explained that it was a salary the company paid her, separate from the money she received from fans. He protested, saying that even if it was a salary, it still wasn't right. But she said it wasn't that she simply wanted to give him money. She said earnestly that she was just asking a streamer for a job and paying them for it. That was all. She explained that this was payment for work related to the live stream. She said that if he didn't do this, she had no one else to turn to. After that, he agreed to do it, saying that what she said seemed right. Her face lit up when she heard that. He added that there was one last issue, which was her staying over. He said bluntly that it was impossible and that she couldn't stay. Her face immediately twisted in astonishment, and she grabbed his shoulders, exclaiming, "Why not?" She reminded him that he'd let her stay last night. He said that, just as he thought, living together was out of the question. She yelled that they wouldn't be living together, but he explained that for most Japanese people, living with someone of the opposite sex has romantic implications. She stopped yelling and said that it would really only be temporary, for a short while. She was lying directly on top of him and pleading, saying to think of it as helping Nina. He repeated the thought that helping her was the same as helping Nina. The person once saved by Nina could now help her in return. He said, "All right," at which her face lit up again, but he said there was one condition. He brought up that she had run away from home after a fight with her parents, and he proposed that they work on resolving that issue together. He told her that if she agreed, he would listen to her story and see what he could do to help. She looked around nervously, and he reassured her that he wasn't asking her to tell him right away. However, he said that if he saw she had no intention of resolving this issue, he would ask her to leave. She nodded in agreement and thanked him, saying she was really in a bind. She also mentioned that maybe she should go back to school. He agreed, saying it would be better for her to return to school. She added that, speaking of which, she had left her uniform in her bag this whole time, so it was wrinkled. He turned to her when he heard the word uniform. She said casually that she'd just wash it in the washing machine. He turned back, asking in surprise, "What uniform?" "Which uniform?" She lifted up the plaid skirt and said, "This one." He looked horrified as she said it was just a normal high school uniform. He asked hesitantly, "Are you a high school student?" He immediately told her to forget everything he just said. She grumbled, telling him not to overreact. He cried out that there was absolutely no way he could let a high school student stay at his place. He yelled that it would make him a criminal. She replied that even if he said that, she was already here last night, so it was already too late. He looked shocked, saying he wasn't home last night, but she pointed out that a high school student still stayed at his place. He let out a horrified sound as the realization dawned on him. She placed a hand on her chin and wondered aloud what would happen if she were taken into protective custody by the police after being kicked out. She said that if the police asked her a lot of questions, she'd be forced to confess that she'd been staying at his place. She wondered what the police would think of him after hearing that. He yelled at her to wait a minute. She looked at him triumphantly and asked if he would let her stay. He could only look at her with anxiety as she successfully continued to convince him to let her stay. Finally, he asked in defeat, "Do I really have any other choice?" She said she'd been thinking and asked if his long hair was getting in the way. She asked if he was trying to grow it out. He replied that going to get a haircut was a hassle, so he just didn't go. She excitedly said that she would cut his hair for him, at which he asked if she actually knew how. She replied that she'd never cut anyone's hair before, but she cuts her own bangs and stuff. She snapped the scissors in front of his face and said it would be fine. He looked horrified, but she just smiled and said she'd make him look really handsome. He tried to tell her to wait a second, but she paid him no mind. After all was said and done, he found himself sitting in a barber shop as the barber was putting the finishing touches on his hair. He thanked the barber for his hard work and looked in the mirror. He looked at himself, wondering how this had happened. His hair was shorter now, and his eyes were clearly visible. Just then, Nina, who was waiting outside, asked if he was done. She complimented him, saying he looked great. She apologized for messing up his hair, but said that it looked really good on him. She told him to look at the clothes she'd just bought and invited him to come with her. He tilted his head innocently and asked, "Where to?" She shouted excitedly, "On a date!" He was shocked, but followed her anyway. She said that since she'd be staying at Ao's place, she needed to buy a few things, including a change of clothes. He quietly followed her from behind. She turned around and asked if he was even listening. Noticing the distance between them, she wondered why he was walking so far away. He looked away and said that walking so close would be a crime. She asked, "Are you still thinking about that?" She said he looked suspicious walking so far away, and that he'd look more handsome than suspicious if he walked closer to her. But he insisted that there was no way. Walking closer would look like he was stalking her. She seemed a bit confused and said she didn't think so. She figured they could hold hands or something. He let out a cry of shock, but she quickly changed the subject and told him not to be so far away and to come closer. Suddenly, someone called Miyake's name, saying a soft, "Excuse me," to get his attention. Miyake turned to see a police officer adjusting his cap as he asked if he had a moment. Miyake nervously thought that it was all over. But the police officer showed him a small, tattered teddy bear with a button for an eye and asked if it was his. He said he found it on the ground. Nina said that it was hers and thanked the officer. The officer replied that it was nothing. The officer left peacefully, and Nina told Miyake to look, saying that everything was fine. She gave him a bright smile and told him to come on. His cheeks suddenly flushed red, and he thought that it had been this way since yesterday. She had swept him up in her pace, and now he was doing things he couldn't normally imagine. It didn't feel bad, but for some reason, he asked her if there was anything else she needed to buy. She made a thoughtful sound. A stranger called out Miyake's name, and he immediately tensed up. The stranger noticed and said he was selling magazines. Miyake wondered if this was the first time he'd done something like this. Thinking back, he realized he hadn't been outside at all since he left the company. He thought that even if he did go out, he was too tired. It was a pain to be around other people, and his only joy was watching Nina's live streams. Everything else was just boring. But then he looked at Nina in her normal student uniform and saw the image of the Nina from the live stream standing there, looking at him. He covered his face, where the blush was starting to spread. He wondered to himself what in the world Nina had done to him. Suddenly, Nina ran up to him and called him her boyfriend. She apologized for making him wait, and he stammered that he wasn't her boyfriend or anything. But she cheerfully asked if he was so sure, then suggested they get going. She apologized for putting him through all this, but instead of accepting, he thanked her. She looked at him quizzically. He ran his fingers through his newly shortened hair and said that today was actually really fun, and that this kind of thing wasn't so bad after all. He smiled at her and said he was really glad she brought him along today. She answered with a smile of her own. She pointed out that he didn't have a desk at his place and asked if it was okay for her to buy one. He asked if that was okay with her and asked if she needed to buy a futon. She looked at him puzzled, and he explained that he only had one futon. She exclaimed, "What?" All their commotion drew the attention of someone who looked up from his phone and saw her laughing about something. He recognized her and wondered if it was Shiraishi. Nina, one of the streamers, greeted everyone. "Long time no see," she introduced herself as Amasaki Nina. She explained that her PC was having issues and she couldn't stream. Comments poured in asking if she had fixed her computer. Coco commented that the stream was late, while others pointed out technical issues, like her mic sounding off. Someone else told her to just relax. Nina read all of it and said her computer still wasn't fixed, so she was using a laptop. Another comment excitedly said she was finally streaming. Another person wrote that they could help fix her computer. She said she had actually planned to only stream after getting a new computer, but she missed everyone too much. On a park bench, Miyake covered his face with his hands, his emotions swelling. He wanted to scream that he loved her and that he missed her so much too. Her voice came from the phone saying she would end the stream early, though it seemed like that wasn't even possible on this laptop. In her room, Nina was reading comments. Someone asked if computers in heaven could break. Nina replied that she uses a human's computer because she's a human who is sent to the heavenly realm. Another person commented that they'd never heard of a setup like that before. She told him not to call it a setup since it was on the official website. The comment section turned humorous when someone commented, laughing that she was promoting the website. LOL. Another told her she'd fumbled. The next person tried to defend her, saying she'd mentioned it during her debut and they just didn't know. Another comment said they would go check, but she just smiled and told them she would update them on her future plans. Aosan donated 100 yen and wrote that he was happy to see Nina streaming, adding that it had been a while. Later, when he got home, she welcomed him. She apologized for making him leave during the stream. She said it was just too difficult to stream on the laptop. He replied that it was fine and asked if his voice had been picked up. He said in a serious tone that if Nina's stream had problems, he would never be able to forgive himself. She laughed, saying he was so serious it was funny. Speaking of which, he asked if she was okay with her streaming schedule. She scrolled through her phone and said that she'd told her manager her computer was acting up, so she had to stream less. She said she couldn't exactly tell them that she was running away from home. She told him that there was someone named Ao-san in the stream earlier. He jokingly asked if that was him, thinking about how he had donated as usual. She replied that it was his screen name, but he then countered that there could be other people with the same name in her stream. She asked if that was really possible. She insisted it was definitely Al-san. She said he'd been commenting and doing all sorts of things since her debut stream. And today he had donated and said he was so happy to see her stream. He grew tense as she continued, saying that he talks just like Miyake, and that he doesn't feel alive without Nina's streams, or that the computer surely couldn't handle Nina's cuteness, or something like that. He quickly covered his face with both hands to hide his embarrassment and told her it was him, and to please forgive him. She asked what for. He replied, for everything. She exclaimed that this was crazy and said it must be fate. He looked at her, confused. She said it's because you don't get to meet a viewer like this every day. She felt it was destiny. She also complained that she had admitted to being Nina so easily when they first met. She said she had been thinking about how the fans would feel and had wondered if she should have lied. But it was too late for that now. She apologized to him for this. He told her that she only said it because he asked in the first place, so she had nothing to apologize for. He said that he was surprised, and he shouldn't have been. But even though he'd asked who was behind the screen, Nina had always just been Nina to him. He sat down next to her, and with that same smile, he affirmed that Nina was very special to him. She said his name, and then boldly asked if he was in love. He put his hands up defensively and stammered that he really liked Nina, but he was talking about the virtual Nina. He said it wasn't like he was in love or wanted a relationship or anything, just that Nina was very special to him. He argued that saying he wanted to be with the real Nina was ridiculous. She lightly tapped her own cheek and said, for example, if Nina got a boyfriend, would you hate that? He hesitated to answer, but finally said that she was talking about the person behind Nina. She agreed that he was right. He looked away and answered vaguely that in that case he didn't mind and that it was a private matter. Instead, he said that they should keep it a secret. He said he wants everyone to have their own private space. However, he doubted that everyone would think the same way he did. He looked down and said that's why he thought she said he should keep it a secret from his viewers. Then he turned back and shouted that it was just his opinion. She laughed and said she knew he would say that. He asked if she had someone like that. She playfully replied that she'd said it was just an example. He accepted that answer. However, her face grew sad when he wasn't there, as she looked at the chats on her phone. The person was asking when they could meet and insisted that if she didn't come to school, that was fine, but she should call them. Nina sat in the corner of the classroom, thinking how awful this was. She had no one to talk to. She told herself that even though the class schedule had just changed, she still didn't go to school. She wondered why she couldn't talk to people in class when she could do it so easily on her live streams. Suddenly, a voice called out Shiraishi's name. 2 girls were standing there, asking if she had a moment. In her head, she cried out that they were talking to her. She cheerfully asked what was up, but they immediately got straight to the point and asked what her relationship with Yaotome was. She froze and said that she and Mei had known each other for a long time. The 2 girls gasped, one of them saying that she called Yaotome by his first name. She realized that was what they wanted to know. However, a boy approached them and asked if they were talking about him. Yaotome tilted his head and threatened that if they had a problem with him, they should come to him directly. The girls were embarrassed but left anyway, saying it was nothing important. He sighed as if he had just done the most tedious thing, and told Shiraishi it was funny how she still didn't have any friends. She yelled that it was his fault. He asked how. She said it was because Mei-kun had stolen all the girls' hearts. He bluntly replied that he didn't know what she was talking about, but he said it was okay because she still had him. She looked at him as he stood confidently beside her. He asked what she was doing, skipping school. He said he'd texted her, but she'd ignored him. She apologized and said she hadn't been home, so she'd been busy. He asked if she was okay. She replied that she was staying with an acquaintance, but she was fine. He looked at her doubtfully and said that reminded him, asking if she was the one shopping in front of the station last week. She hesitantly answered that it might have been her. He asked if she was with a guy, but she replied that he was mistaken, that she was alone. He called her Shiraishi and said that it was definitely her with a guy, a mischievous smile on his face. Meanwhile, Miyaki was in his apartment, looking at the boxes piled up in the room and wondering what he was supposed to do with all of this. Shiraishi had told him she wanted to order some things and would have them delivered here. He didn't expect it all to show up like this. He wondered what was going on. He looked at the invoice and read that it was computer equipment. Excited, he wondered if it was for Nina's live streams. He smiled, thinking this was probably the last one. Now he wondered if she could even live stream with all this stuff. Then he realized this was way too much equipment. He exclaimed that she was all set to settle down for good with all of this. He said aloud that it was time. He asked her why she had run away from home. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and he wondered if it was her. He opened the door to see her looking at him worriedly. He welcomed her in, confused. She said she was back, but needed to talk to him. He replied that he needed to talk to her, too. But she cut in, saying that could wait. She was in a hurry, and a voice called out from behind her, calling her Shiraishi. He looked at her as she turned away. A million thoughts were racing through his mind. Yotome stepped forward and said, just as he thought, he looked at the boy, realizing he was the one Shiraishi was with the other day. He asked Shiraishi what was really going on. Miyaki looked at the 2 high school students standing in front of him. He wondered who this guy was and what was really happening here. He glanced between them. Yotome suddenly turned to him and asked who he was. Yotome glared at Miyaki, asking if they were living together. This guy is terrifying, Miyaki thought to himself. Yotome suddenly pulled Shiraishi close and declared he was her boyfriend. Even Shiraishi was surprised by that, but Miyaki didn't seem to notice as he repeated what he'd just heard. Nina's boyfriend? He thought it was a private matter, but then argued with himself that she was Nina, and he knew it. His mind was a mess. He couldn't think straight. But then he heard Shiraishi shout that it wasn't true. She told Mei not to say such weird things. She said that Ao was frozen in shock. She apologized to him and said that Yotome is her childhood friend, and Mei had said that without her permission. She explained that she had told him as much the other day. She insisted she didn't have a boyfriend and that she wasn't lying. Yotome called out to Tsukasa and asked if this was a crime. He asked Miyaki if he realized she was a minor. He said that taking a minor home with him was illegal. Then he put his phone to his ear and said that in that case, he was calling the police. Miyaki froze, thinking this was his death sentence, but Shiraishi told him to wait and asked him to follow her, saying they needed to talk. She apologized to Miyaki again and said they would talk later. Then she left a stunned Miyaki behind. At the park, Shiraishi tried to reason with Yaotome. She said she was only asking him to let her stay, and not to blame Aosan for this. But Yaotome replied that was impossible, saying she should have come to him first. He also said she could have just come to his place instead. She thought about going to Meikun's place, but said she'd be a bother to his mom. However, he argued back, asking what if that guy did something to her. She yelled that Aosan wasn't that kind of person. She said she'd never had any trouble with him. Yaotome insisted that Aosan was just waiting for a chance to catch her off guard. But she retorted that Aosan had never even asked for her name. She gave him a skeptical look and said she had only given him her contact info, but Aosan still kept his distance. She said she would be leaving Aosan's place eventually anyway, because she believed he was trying not to get too involved. That's why she sincerely told him that Aosan was fine. Yaotome was silent for a few minutes, then said he was going home. Before he left, he turned back and told her to let him know immediately if anything happened. Leaving the park. He wondered why she'd said everything was fine. He turned his head, thinking it couldn't be, wondering if she had a crush on Aosan. She arrived at Miyaki's apartment and immediately apologized for earlier, but found him curled up into a ball. She told him that she'd spoken with Meikun about it. She asked if he was okay. He looked up and said he'd thought about turning himself in before he was reported to the police. Shiraishi yelled that she wouldn't report him, meaning because she had ordered way too much stuff. He stood up, rubbing the back of his head, and asked about the guy from before, Meikun, asking if he'd gone home. She gave a big smile and said that Meikun really wants a girlfriend, and she bet he was really surprised. She mentioned she'd been asked out 5 times. He was surprised and exclaimed, 5 times? But she said she turned them down every time. She said she'd thought about maybe accepting one of them. But the thing she loves most is live streaming. She reminded him not to tell Meikun about her live streams. She also mentioned that Meikun told her she could stay at his place. But Meikun lives with his mom, and that would be awkward. She said, why would she bother them? Plus, she wouldn't even be able to live stream. Then she figured she was bothering him and whispered a small, sorry. He said that it still wasn't a good idea for her to stay at his place. But that didn't mean she had to leave. He said the issue was that she couldn't go home right now. He sat down beside her, looked into her eyes and said that's why. He asked if she could at least tell him the reason she ran away from home. She asked what he wanted to know, and he replied that all he knew was that she'd fought with her parents. Instead of answering, she asked if he was hungry or if he'd eaten anything yet. He said he hadn't and pressed on, asking if she didn't want to have this serious talk. He told her he was being completely serious. She just smiled brightly and said they should eat something while they talk about important things. She struck a clever pose and told him they should go eat. He sat across from her and asked why they were at a karaoke box. She replied that a family restaurant would have been uncomfortable. He thought to himself, wouldn't it be better to just eat at home? She said this place was private and he could order food, while she could sing. She cheered that this was the best of both worlds. She picked up the remote and he looked at her, asking if she was planning to sing. She replied that since he came all this way, why wouldn't she? She asked him if he wanted to hear Nina sing. Without a moment's hesitation, he said flat out that he did. Afterward, he muttered to himself that maybe they shouldn't talk about it anymore. He repeated that he was trying to be serious here. He said he knew that talking about it might not change anything, but if there was anything he could do, he wanted to do it. He told her to please talk to him. She lowered her head and said it wasn't that she didn't want to talk, but that there's a certain order to things like this. He mumbled, but she cut him off, asking if he was going to ask for her real name instead. He held up his hands defensively, saying he had no intention of asking that. She asked if that was how he felt, but then said he would still ask why she ran away from home. She rested her chin on her hand and said that in that case, he should just ask for her name. She said she knew Ao wouldn't spread rumors, but he replied that she was one of Talbum's people. She told him that the online Nina was actually Shiraishi. He asked if her real name was also Nina. She replied that her name uses kanji characters. She said that when she was deciding on a name, she wanted to pick one that would be easy to cover for if her real name ever slipped out. He burst out laughing. She asked why he was laughing. He replied that after she made such a big deal out of it, he thought it would be something completely different. She leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. She said that she really liked Ao's smiling face. His cheeks flushed slightly. As she told him that the first time they met, he looked like he was about to die, but he still smiled and talked about Nina. Even laughing with her. It wasn't just about Nina, she expressed. She was happy herself. Then, she stood up and suggested he should get a haircut, asking why he didn't show his face a little. She brushed his hair up and said that she liked him when he parted his hair. She asked him if something was wrong, then awkwardly said she didn't mean it like that. He chuckled softly and said he knew. He placed a hand on his lips, thinking to himself that he understood what she was trying to say. The two of them sat in silence after that, and he suggested that after she finished eating, they should head home. She agreed. Later, as they were walking together, Shiraishi suddenly said that all they did was eat and talk about names. And then she said, this was the first time she'd ever gone to karaoke without singing. Miyaki froze, remembering he'd wanted to hear her sing. She apologized, saying she didn't get to sing live for him. He replied that it was okay and said it wasn't something he usually got a chance to do anyway. But she reminded him that he had said he wanted to hear it. He tried to calm himself, thinking it was true. He did want to hear her sing. He might never get that chance again. She said she wanted to sing too, then tilted her head playfully and said that was why they should go back. He watched her as she said it looked like it was about to rain, so they should hurry and run. He wondered how much longer she would stay, but then thought that just a little more time would be okay. Shiraishi looked at the thermometer in her hand, which read 38.5 degrees Celsius, and said that just as she'd suspected, he had gotten sick after all. Miyaki was lying on a futon with a Nina-themed body pillow next to him, but outside the covers. She asked if he felt all right, then mentioned that it had started raining on their way back from karaoke, and they both got soaked. He weakly apologized through his feverish haze. She put her hands on her hips and said there was no medicine here, asking if he could wait until the pharmacy opened. But he said it was fine and that she should prioritize her studies. More importantly, he called her Shiraishi, and she wondered why he was using her last name. She said he could just call her Nina. He brought up her friend from before, but she waved it off, saying Mei-kun was just trying to act cool. She told him not to worry about him. Then she asked him what he needed. He asked if she could stay at a net cafe or somewhere else today. She looked at him, puzzled. He replied that he didn't want his cold to affect Nina's live streaming. She smiled and asked if it wasn't a little late for that. Besides, she hadn't set up her streaming equipment yet, so she couldn't do anything anyway. He said that it didn't matter. She called his name, but got no response. Then asked if he'd fallen asleep. She brushed the hair from his forehead and realized he was burning up. Worried, she wondered if it was safe to leave him home alone, but then mumbled that she had to get to school. She asked, even though he was fast asleep, if he'd be okay while she was gone. She looked at her phone, saw it was 7:58, and cried out that this was bad. She turned to leave, but looked back at him one last time, saying she was heading out. Before she closed the door, she heard a small, concerned word from him. She wondered what to do now, then thought cheerfully that Ao could speak so casually. She wondered why Ao seemed so cute right now at home. Miyaki, lying in the middle of the futon, thought to himself that he felt like he just made a mistake. He was so tired. But at times like this, he hated it because he'd always have nightmares. In the dream, a woman told him that she wasn't the one who spread the rumor about Aoba cheating. She told him that he was exactly what everyone around him thought he was. She suggested they break up, saying they shouldn't waste each other's time anymore. She said bluntly that there was no need to be any clearer, and that she didn't need someone like him. Later, Shiraishi announced that she was home as she walked into the room, phone in hand. Miyaki was still sound asleep. She asked him if he'd been sleeping this whole time. Miyaki made an uncomfortable sound. She muttered that he was groaning a lot and wondered if he was all right or if she should wake him up. She asked if he'd managed to get his medicine. Miyaki didn't answer, but quietly whispered Nina's name. Shiraishi froze, but then a mischievous smile appeared on her face, and she lay down beside him. She playfully asked if he called for her and said that Nina was right here. She said that today was special because she would stay right by his side. She told him to get well soon, then rested her head completely on his futon next to his pillow. She gently brushed a few sweaty strands of hair from his forehead and thought that he was always kind. But that was because she was Nina. What if she wasn't Nina? Suddenly, he turned over and wrapped his arm around her, pulling her head close to his chest. She softly called his name and wondered if he was asleep. Her face began to flush with embarrassment. She called out to him and tried to wake him up, but he only moved slightly, his arm still around her. She thought it was okay, until he completely passed out on top of her, trapping her underneath. Later, at work, Miyaki wondered what he had done while holding a mop. His manager was standing right beside him and turned to ask if he was talking to her. He just replied that he was talking to himself. He thought that he was definitely being avoided. He remembered the moment she paused and said it was fine when he asked if she needed help. After that, she said she was going to eat by herself today. He knew that ever since the day he had the fever, Nina had been acting very strange. He thought he had slept the whole day and really didn't know what had happened. He worried, wondering if something had happened while he was asleep. He restlessly contemplated how he couldn't understand it at all. His manager observed Miyaki's inner turmoil and asked what was wrong. When she said that perhaps he had started to like someone, he turned to look at her. His cheeks flushed as she pointed out that he had cut his hair and changed his look. She said that she thought it might be because of a girl, and asked if Miyaki had found a girl in real life that he liked. He tried to deny it, but his manager continued, saying she knew she had received these tickets as a gift, but thought that he should use them. She gave him 2 movie tickets and said that she doesn't watch this genre, but it's very popular with girls his age. She told him to do his best, then gave him the tickets before leaving him to wonder if she would even like this movie. After leaving the movie theater, Shiraishi commented that the movie was surprisingly quite interesting. She excitedly said that the scene at the end where the shark and the penguin merged was amazing. He expressed his happiness that she had liked it and realized that she was interested in things like this. She said that his manager was so kind for giving them those tickets. Miyaki thought that when he invited her, she came along as usual. He guessed he had been worrying for nothing about her avoiding him. As he was walking right behind her, she suddenly turned around as if she had just remembered something, but then got flustered because they were standing too close to each other, mumbling a never mind before backing away. He felt anxious, thinking that she was intentionally trying to avoid him. As for Shiraishi, she was thinking that this situation was awful, because every time she was near Ao, her heart would start pounding. An annoyed voice called out, asking what Ao was doing. Both of them turned and saw Yatome standing there with a scowl on his face. Shiraishi smiled and said that he actually came. Miyaki exclaimed in surprise, "You called him?" She replied that she had told Yatome she was going to the movies, and he said he would come. Miyaki pointed out that they had already seen it, but Shiraishi said that she didn't really think Yatome would come. He had texted asking if she was free today, but she told him she was going to see a movie with Usan. After that, he said he'd come along. She had texted back that if he left right then, he could probably make the showing. However, Yatome bluntly said that he didn't care about the movie and asked why the two of them were here together, asking if it wasn't enough that she was staying at his house. Miyaki opened his mouth to explain, but Shiraishi gently tugged on Yatome's sleeve and asked to speak with him in private. His eyes widened when he saw her wide-eyed gaze, and he blushed. He yelled, "What do you think you're doing all of a sudden?" But Nina thought to herself that she felt perfectly fine with Mei-kun and wondered why Ao-san made her heart flutter. Shiraishi told herself that that wasn't what Usan was aiming for, and that what had happened the day before was just an accident. She let go of Yaotome's sleeve and said, "Okay, thanks. That's enough." Yaotome asked irritably, "What was that all about?" Then she told them both to wait here, saying she was going to go look at the souvenir goods from the movie. After a moment of silence, the atmosphere around Miyaki became tense and awkward. Yaotome was also quiet for a moment, then abruptly spoke up, asking if Miyaki liked Shiraishi. Miyaki was caught off guard by this question, but Yaotome continued, "If not, then what's in it for you? Hiding a young girl like that." Nina, some distance away, thought about how she had been at Aosen's house for several days now, and wondered why she was suddenly feeling so anxious about it. She looked at her phone as a notification sound went off, then frowned when she realized it was from her manager. Meanwhile, Miyaki started to reply, with Yaotome's words, asking if he liked Shiraishi, ringing in his head. But just then, Shiraishi appeared in front of him, holding up her phone and crying out that this was awful. She said that she'd just received a call from her manager at home. Miyaki quickly cut in and asked Yaotome if they could talk here. Yaotome tilted his head in confusion, and as Nina looked at him, she realized that he knew nothing about her live streams. Nina looked at him in shock, then said they could discuss it later. Yaotome's frown deepened as he asked, "What are you talking about?" He asked if she was hiding something from him, then asserted that Miyaki knew something. He went on asking, "Why does Miyaki know and I don't?" Nina mumbled a small apology without daring to look at him. Yaotome turned away, saying he understood and that he would go home. She called out after him, but he just told her to talk with Miyaki as much as she wanted. He grumbled as he walked away, thinking that he was the first person she had ever called by name. And before, it was only him. He remembered the months they spent growing up together, muttering that it used to be just him and that he should be there. Miyagi quietly asked her if she should go after him. Nina said that she would contact Yaotome later, adding that he often did things like this. Pushing that aside, she exclaimed that this situation was extremely bad. She explained that the office had called to inform her they were sending something to her, and it seemed they had sent a letter. Miyaki asked if it was something she needed to sign for. She replied that it wasn't, but that she just didn't want anyone to see the letter. She said that she was running away from home, and receiving mail could cause problems. She closed her eyes, sighing that she really didn't want to go home. But she still had to go back to get the letter. However, she was worried that Ao was only letting her stay because she couldn't go home. And she thought that if she went back, he wouldn't let her stay with him anymore. Miyaki, on the other hand, was worried when he realized how much she truly didn't want to go home. He placed a hand on his chin and thought maybe her family had treated her badly. An image of her tear-stained face appeared in his mind, and he wondered what would happen if she ran into her parents while getting the letter. He asked if he should go with her to get it. She hesitated and asked, "You mean you'll come to my house with me, and then I can come back to stay with you?" He replied that she was right, but then realized that it would mean he would find out where she lived. He said that on second thought, maybe he shouldn't go, but she told him it was okay, and that she wanted him to come with her. Later, they were standing in front of an apartment building, and Miyaki realized that he was really there. Outside the elevator, he said he would wait outside. She asked what the point of him coming was then, and added that she didn't think anyone would be there. She pressed the elevator button. He asked if both of her parents were at work. She replied that her dad was at work, but her mom. Then she said they weren't here, so it would be fine. They went to her front door, and she said no one was there before inviting him in. Miyaki thought about entering his Oshi's house, wondering if a fan like him was even allowed to do this. She said she was going to look for the letter and told him to wait here. He agreed. Realizing he was quite tense, he asked if she lived with her father, and if it was just the two of them. She replied that yes, it was just the two of them because her mother had left. Then she cried out, "Found it, thank goodness!" She said that the letter didn't look like it had been opened. Suddenly, a voice from behind made her freeze. She turned around and saw her father standing in the doorway, She said she thought he was at work. He replied that he was nearby and decided to stop by on his way back. He turned to look at Miyake with a questioning gaze, his suspicious eyes unwavering. Athena quickly stepped in front of Miyake and said that he was just a friend who happened to be with her when she stopped by the house. Her father didn't beat around the bush and asked directly if he had been taking care of her while she was away from home. She lowered her head and confirmed that he had. He said that after she left home without permission, did she feel any shame for causing trouble for other people? Miyake spoke up, telling him to wait a moment, stepping out from behind her and telling her father that she wasn't a bother to him at all. He insisted that it was his idea for her to stay at his place because she was all alone in the dark, trying to fend for herself. However, the man said that while he appreciated Miyake's concern, he was still certain. He said that he understood exactly what was going on with his own daughter. He said that she had probably forced him to agree to let her stay. Miyake tried to deny it, but her father continued, saying that's how it always was. When things didn't go her way, she would ignore her parents, though she had never run away from home before. He said that she was always seeking recognition and just wanted to get everyone's attention. He even mentioned how she started doing pointless things like live streaming, and that the letter she received was also related to that. He said that he had told her to stop and that he couldn't believe his daughter would get involved in such trivial things. He added that she shouldn't disgrace the family any further. However, Miyake spoke up, saying he didn't think it was shameful or that it deserved to be called pointless or trivial. Miyake exclaimed that it wasn't like that at all. Playing a character and putting on live streams for everyone to enjoy is not the least bit easy. He asked her father if he didn't think she put a great deal of heart and effort into what she does. He said that Nina has a huge number of fans, that thousands of people follow her streams, and that it's an incredible thing, that making so many people smile is not a pointless endeavor. He emphasized that the very thought and effort she puts into her live streams is what has helped save many people. Therefore, he strongly demanded that her father take back what he had said. Through it all, her father didn't budge. Instead, he admitted that his words had been a bit harsh. However, he said that this was a family matter, and it would be best if Miyake left. Miyake thought that he was right, but from behind him, Nina grabbed his shirt and asked if he was planning to leave. She said that if he left, she would go with him. Miyake looked at her, puzzled, and said that since she'd come this far, she should talk things out properly with her father. But she replied that there was no point in talking to her dad because he wouldn't listen to what she had to say. That's why she ran away from home. She said that it was always like this, that he didn't even listen to her mother, and that's why her mother left. She added that even if she couldn't stay with Ayo, she would just go and find somewhere else. She turned her back, ready to leave, but Miyake blocked her path and told her that she knew this wouldn't solve anything. She stubbornly told him that she'd go back with him, since he was the one who said so. He turned to her father and said that things had come to this. He placed his business card on the table and said it had his address and contact information. Her father asked what he meant by that, and Miyake explained that he was a complete stranger, and he understood that this was quite an outrageous request. But he asked for her father's permission to let Nina stay with him for a little while longer. He said that even if they were to talk right now, for various reasons, he didn't think the conversation would be productive. So he begged her father to give Nina a little more time and bowed his head to him, pleading for it. Her father maintained a stern expression, but said that he would take down his contact information. He added that even if he tried to stop her, she'd just run away again. He admitted that compared to not knowing her whereabouts, at least knowing she was safe was better. He said that this was definitely better. Miyake thanked her father and promised that if anything were to happen, he would contact him immediately. Her father said it was fine and that he needed to get back to work. He then told them there was nothing more to be said. Nina didn't meet his eyes as he left, but once they were outside the house, she thanked Miyake for saying all that to her father. She told him he must be surprised at how trivial her reason for running away was. He replied that she had told him she didn't get along with her parents And now he knew it was because they were against her becoming a VTuber. She said it was just a typical parent-child argument, and then asked if that was really a reason for her to go home. Before she could say anything else, he cut her off and told her he didn't think so. He crouched down to her eye level as if speaking to a child and told her that things hadn't been easy for her at all. He said that this whole time, she hadn't been able to go home. Immediately, she burst into tears. She remembered her dad telling her that was enough, as she was telling her mom about the school entrance ceremony. He had told her not to waste his time with things like that. Her father had always been like that, and her mother had once told her that since she was already in high school, she could take care of herself now. After that day, her mother never came home again. Later, at school, Yaotome asked if she wanted to go somewhere after class. She answered with a simple, but her eyes widened when she saw it. A poster advertising auditions for Niji live VTubers. She wasn't sure why, but she just wanted someone to see her. She wondered if it would be okay to become a VTuber. Her mother had once asked if it was some shady company, but Nina had told her no, that it's a famous company. Her mom agreed and said that she would at least sign this form for her. Her mom said that she didn't want her dad to know that she was still seeing her. Nina replied that she understood, and her mom added that this would be the last time they do this together. Then, her mom told her that her parents had officially divorced. Nina asked if that meant her mom had decided on her custody. But her mom just told her to get along with her father. Nina could only sit there in a daze. Later, when she was live streaming, Nina thanked her viewers for coming to her stream today. At first, her streams weren't going smoothly. She told her viewers that she'd be happy if they could follow her next stream. She thought to herself that today's stream was terrible. She couldn't say anything at all. After the stream ended, she read the comments. One comment said that she seemed more nervous than expected, even for her first live stream. Nina sighed, but quickly cheered up when she realized she had also received many positive comments. She repeated to herself that she didn't care. But in reality, she used to think only big VTuber fans would watch her. However, there were people like this too. When she read Osan's comment, who said it was his first time watching a stream like this? He was cheering for her, sent her a 500 yen donation, and told her to keep up the good work. She thanked him for finding her. When she saw that her subscriber count had reached 682,000, she was happy that more and more people were following her. She told herself that maybe it was because of the longer live stream than last time. In the comments, Miyaki asked if Nina often did longer live streams. She thought that she could only stream when her dad wasn't home. But since this was a job and it was very popular, she wondered if she should talk to her dad. However, when she mentioned it, her dad was just suspicious and said he knew she was secretly doing something. He asked if she was going to do this while her exams were coming up. He said she should only do things like that after she's entered the workforce and become independent. He declared that kids like her just wanted to mess around and she wouldn't understand. She muttered that this was a job and that she was even getting paid by the company. But he flatly said that the work she was doing was just based on a short-lived trend. He said it wouldn't last forever, and when that job disappears, he asked what she would have left. He questioned if, when that happened, she could put this on her resume. He even doubted if this job was something she could write down and be recognized for, and emphasized that the company and the people watching those streams were not responsible for her life. She tried to argue back that there were many people looking forward to her streams. But her dad replied that those people would quickly find someone else to replace her, because it didn't have to be her. In a fit of anger, she stormed into her room, packed her bags, and angrily yelled, "Why is he always like this?" She told herself she shouldn't have said anything and wondered why her dad wouldn't listen to her. Looking at her savings book, she thought it would be fine if she went out on her own, since she had a decent amount of savings. She decided to stay at a net cafe for a while. She thought the only way her dad would find her was through her live streams. Although she understood some of what her dad was saying, she still decided to leave. When she arrived at the net cafe, the assistant returned her card and said that minors weren't allowed to stay past 10 p.m. The assistant said that high school students had to be accompanied by an adult. She asked Nina if she understood. She looked through her phone and thought to herself that she didn't know a rental contract required written parental consent. As for her mom, she couldn't ask for her help. Nina thought that she had a lot of followers, but none of them could help her in real life. Now, she understood that everyone loved Amasaki Nina, but not the real Nina. Katataki-no-ken commented that Nina must have a good relationship with her family, because he could feel it through her stories. She burst into tears, thinking that the real Nina was nothing like the image everyone knew. In the end, there was nothing, and she guessed that no one would find her. She read a few more comments, asking if there wasn't going to be a live stream. Another comment said that Nina didn't stream today, but asked if anyone had seen Akari's singing stream. That's when she realized Miyake was looking at her. But she only saw Nina's keychain dropped on the street. She picked it up and ran after Miyake, thinking that he couldn't just abandon Nina here. She begged him, with tears still in her eyes, not to leave her behind. She tapped him on the shoulder, thinking that she was standing right in front of him. Even though she wasn't the Nina he loved, she smiled, pointed at the keychain, and said, "You dropped this." Nina thought that maybe anyone else could have felt the same way she did. But on that day, he was the one who found her at the apartment. She burst into tears, saying that was why her mother divorced and left. And her father never listened to anything she said. His eyes widened when he realized he was the one who had made her cry. She grabbed his shirt, tugged lightly, and asked if he was listening. He told himself that he wanted to listen to her seriously, but when he looked down at her hand gripping his clothes, he worried that it would be terrible if someone saw this. A crying girl and a strange man who wasn't a resident of the building. He suggested they should go home and talk there. She agreed and gently apologized, saying she knew it was a pain for him to have to listen to everything, but he reassured her, saying that wasn't it at all. He really wanted to hear what Nina-sen had to say. That was why he suggested she go home. She looked at him intently, thinking it was always like this. Even when he knew she was Nina, he still cared about her. She remembered when he said that it didn't change the fact that Nina was always special to him. Nina thought that he had done his best to help her, and she recalled when he suggested they try to fix the relationship between her and her parents. Miyake was the one who was willing to look for her. She softly said that she liked him. He was stunned for a moment, then said he didn't quite hear what she just said, and asked again. But she immediately said loudly that it was nothing, really nothing at all. She turned away and said they should get going. He was still blushing, realizing she wasn't following him. She repeated that it was nothing, then took his hand and asked if this was okay, just for a little while longer. The next morning, she wrote a message to her manager, wishing him a good morning and apologizing for bothering him so early. She wrote that she was contacting him because she had a question to ask. A message bubble appeared as she asked if it was against company policy for a VTuber to be in a romantic relationship. She stared at her phone until the reply came. Her manager asked if Nina-san had found someone she liked. They wrote that they were sure the company wouldn't object, but reminded her to keep her personal life separate from her on-stream persona. The manager also wrote that it wouldn't be good to restrict her too much, since she has her own life. The company's policy has always been to prioritize the streamer's feelings. Nina immediately shot up, exclaiming if that was really true. She thought they would say no, but now she realized that it was perfectly okay for her to like Aosen. Beaming with this realization, she repeated that there was no problem with her liking Aosen. Later, while Miyake was on his shift, standing in front of the staff room and looking at his phone, the store owner called out to him. She asked if something was wrong, then asked if he wasn't planning on heading home yet. He replied that he was just about to go, and asked if he should stay. She loudly told him there was no need, and urged him to go home. She said that there was a girl waiting for him in front of the store. He stepped outside and saw Nina standing there, who wished him a good morning. He asked what was up, and she replied that she was just wondering if Aosen was here, so she'd peeked at the cash register. Another employee approached, and Nina noted that he works the night shift. She asked, "Aren't there any women working here?" He replied that there are during the day, but at night it's almost all men. Her face lit up, making him nervously wonder what had just happened. He figured she'd never come to his workplace before. Maybe after the incident with her dad, she was worried about being alone. He wondered if she was still having a hard time. Thinking about how her father had left her in his care, Miyake felt a sense of responsibility. He asked if she wanted to go somewhere after his shift was over. She asked if his shift was done and if it was for a change of pace. She replied that it was okay, but he suggested that they didn't have much time at the movies last time. So, if it would make her feel better, they should go. She exclaimed that he was right and that they should go. Thinking to herself that this was a date, Nina apologized, saying she'd left her house unlocked and hadn't brought her key. He replied that he wanted to go home and change too, so it was no problem. Afterwards, they went to an aquarium together and stood watching the penguins. Nina excitedly chirped about how cute they were. He thought it was good that she was being so energetic. He turned to her and said that she looked a little different today. She touched her hair and said she woke up early and curled it. He said he wasn't sure if he should say this, but that hairstyle really suited her. Still, he also told her that her usual look was very nice too. She asked if the style was better. He smiled and said that he thought so. Her eyes practically filled with hearts as she thought that he found her cute even when she looked normal. She hesitantly asked if he wanted a girlfriend. He paused, looked away, and answered softly that he didn't. He said he hadn't really thought about it much. But she argued that Aosan loves Nina. She asked if he would date the person behind Nina. She asked if that would make him happy. He awkwardly repeated, the person behind, and asked if she was talking about herself. She chirped that yes, but then said it was just a hypothetical. She asked if he could date her. Would he? She looked at him, hoping for an answer, but he wondered to himself if he could really date Nina. Finally, he answered that it was impossible. She asked why, and he replied that it was because Nina is still a minor. He said that them living together wasn't a good thing, even though her father had given his permission. Now, dating her was a completely different matter. He was sweating as he waited for her reaction. But she just laughed and said she was happy he didn't hate her. Then she added that she'd heard adults and high schoolers could date as long as both of them consented. She took out her phone and started looking it up. She pulled up an article titled, "Is it a crime for an adult and a minor to date?" She started to say that what she said earlier was just an example, but now she wanted to be serious. However, he cut her off, saying that an adult and a minor aren't the same, and that it wasn't okay for many reasons. He insisted that even if they both agreed, what would everyone around them say? He said that people don't usually accept things like that, and even if she said it was consensual, he didn't think anyone would believe it. Her eyes widened as she remembered what he'd once told her, that there were rumors he was the one who had cheated, and even though he told the truth, no one believed him. She apologized to him, saying she had been so selfish and hadn't thought about his feelings at all. She bowed her head, admitting her fault, then told him to forget what she had just asked and to pretend she'd never said anything. She took his hand in both of hers and said that instead, she would do things the right and proper way. Nina asked him to let her say one more thing. When she turns 18, she would ask him again. She let go of his hand and apologized for holding it. He said it was fine and asked if she was turning 18 this year, and if her birthday was the same as Nina's. She replied that it wasn't. Her birthday was next month. He smiled, but inside he was panicking because that day was so soon. Meanwhile, Nina's father loosened his tie and said that things weren't going well. He recounted how she had told him he would succeed if he started a business. She even quit her job to join him. He told her to just wait a little longer, but she said it was a waste of time. She suggested they break up, sighing heavily and saying that if she had known, she would have chosen Aoba. She looked at his picture on her phone. Nina muttered, wondering if dating was really necessary. She wondered if just being friends would be better for them. She said she just liked being his friend. That's what she had told May. She said she had other things she wanted to do right now, so she didn't really want a boyfriend or anything like that. Yaotome wondered if it was really impossible and wished she would just say it directly. He asked if she had any plans for tomorrow and if it was her birthday. He then asked if she went out and did something every year for her birthday. She didn't answer. just staring at her phone with an affectionate gaze. Meanwhile, the chat on her phone was still open. He asked what kind of cake she liked, and she replied that she liked everything. He pressed her for a clearer answer, and she said she already had plans. He looked up from his books and realized something. He exclaimed that she'd had plans with that other person all along. A flash of shock went through him, as he saw her smiling at her phone with a look of love that he had never received. Then suddenly, she was pulled out of her daze. She called out May's name from behind her, but realized he was already gone. Outside the school, with his bag on his back, Yao Tome wondered what he was even doing. He was in so much shock that he'd left school early without even realizing it. He thought he was going to miss his lesson at this rate. Looking at his phone, he yelled that it was all Miyake's fault and that she was just messing with him. He told himself that he should have reported that guy sooner, but now he couldn't do it. The image of her smile appeared in his mind again. He decided to dismiss the thought, telling himself it was absurd. He had never seen her smile like that before, and realized it was the kind of smile she would give to someone she likes. He wondered what could possibly make a high school student so happy. The shopkeeper asked if she could help Miyake find anything. He awkwardly said that he was fine. He figured that if he didn't choose something soon, the clerk might start to pressure him. He remembered that she had said they would talk when she turned 18, and he knew that next time, he would have to give her a proper answer. Meanwhile, Nina wondered if it would be okay to talk to him on her actual birthday. She worried that it might make him uncomfortable, and she didn't want to create a weird atmosphere on her birthday. She decided she wouldn't bring it up tomorrow and thought they should just have fun instead of making things complicated. At least that's what she had thought. But now she wondered how things had ended up this way, with her lying on top of Miyake, making him flustered. She was confused, not understanding what was happening, and Miyake also realized immediately that this wasn't right. At first, everything had been going fine. Today was Nina-san's birthday, and they had decided to celebrate at home. He gave her a present, and they ate cake together. But then, Nina-san suddenly started acting strange. Her face was bright red, and she suddenly jumped on him, which led to the current situation. He lay there, with Nina on top of. He recalled a similar scene from the past, back at his old job, when he'd go to drinking parties and have to deal with his drunk co-workers. He looked at the cake and suddenly thought of alcohol. The shopkeeper had told him that this cake contained liquor and warned him to be careful with children and people who can't handle alcohol. Those words echoed in his head, and he realized that was the problem. He apologized to Nina, saying he hadn't thought about it when he bought the cake, but instead of listening to him, Nina suddenly confessed that she loved him as her dress slipped off one shoulder. His mind was a mess, wondering what he should do in this situation. He turned his head away, thinking that this was the kind of thing people say when they're drunk. Even though she was 18, she was still just a high school student. Nina repeated her confession and asked him to answer her as an adult. She said that they couldn't date before because she was still a minor, but now she was demanding he give her a straight answer. She asked him how he felt about her, pleading with him to tell her his feelings. He started to think about his feelings, but suddenly, Nina whispered that she was feeling tired and then drifted off to sleep on him. Surprised, he asked, did she just say she was sleepy? She replied that she hadn't slept at all last night for some reason, but she'd been looking forward to the next day so much that she couldn't sleep. He told her that if she wanted to sleep, she should lie down on the futon. Miyake breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Nina had finally fallen asleep, snoring softly on top of him. He thought that "I love you" is easy to say, but perhaps she wasn't fully conscious of it. The next morning, Nina woke up with her hair in a mess. She couldn't remember anything after eating that cake and wondered why Aosen was curled up asleep in the corner of the room. Seeing him curled up in a blanket in the corner, she wondered why he wasn't sleeping on the futon with her. Quietly, she sat down beside him and leaned her head against the wall. She thought about how yesterday was her birthday and gently rested her head on his shoulder, but suddenly, a knock at the door startled her. She wondered if it was the game she had ordered the other day. If so, she could just go out and get it. However, when she opened the door, she saw Naki standing there. Nina realized that it wasn't the delivery person. and she began to wonder in horror who this person could be. But before she could think any further, the woman in front of her spoke, commenting mockingly about her. A young girl like this. Could it be his tastes have changed? The woman continued, I know he was dumped by an older woman, but isn't this a bit much, really? Miyaki suddenly appeared from behind the door, meeting the woman's teasing smile with an expression full of unhealed pain. She said, Long time no see, and he calmly asked her why she had appeared after all this time. He asserted that they had nothing to talk about. She told him not to be so cold. She started to bring up their past, but Miyaki cut her off, asking her to wait a moment. He said that they shouldn't talk about such things here. Nina looked at him worriedly. Miyaki slammed the door in the woman's face, saying he'd be right out. He turned back inside, apologized to Nina, and said he was going to step out for a bit. He told her there was cake from yesterday in the fridge, and that if she was hungry, she could eat it. Miyaki was about to step outside, but suddenly felt a hand tug at his shirt from behind. He turned around, only to meet Nina's worried gaze. She let go of his shirt and apologized, saying it was nothing. They were silent for a moment. Before he left, he gently said that he'd be back as soon as possible. Nina thought about the woman who had just appeared, telling herself there was no mistaking it. That was his ex-girlfriend. She panicked at the thought that this was the type of person Usan liked. Black bobbed hair, a very mature look, dressed simply but elegantly. She compared herself and realized she was completely different. She was Nina with long dyed brown hair and stylish clothes, still just a high school student. Nina frowned deeply, hugging her body pillow tightly and thinking in despair that perhaps his taste had changed a long time ago. She recalled his words, that a lot had happened when he and that girl broke up, and that it had been really difficult. But then, she also remembered him saying he was the one who got dumped, which made him quit his job. Nina stopped feeling sorry for herself and thought that it must mean he had loved that woman very much. With teary eyes, she wondered if he still loved that person. She silently asked herself if he was thinking of getting back together with her. She buried her face in her pillow, sobbing, wondering why that woman had to show up right now. At a family restaurant, Naki asked if that girl was his girlfriend, remarking that she looked quite young. He was evasive, not answering directly, and asked in return why she had come here today. She smiled and asked, Aren't you going to answer my question? She said that the age gap wasn't an issue if they were both okay with it. However, she advised him not to take it too seriously and pointed out that at his age, his peers were still just kids. She went on to say that older men might seem very attractive, but asked what would happen if that changed. Miyaki cut her off with a serious tone, asserting that he already knew all of that. But Naki just looked at him with even more contempt. He further explained that due to some circumstances, the girl was under his care at the moment. Naki smiled and asked unexpectedly, So why don't we give it another try? She suggested that he and she should get back together. A smug smile on her face, Miyaki was as stunned as if he'd been struck by lightning. He recalled that night, when she had called his name, sounding a little annoyed and asked if he was listening. He smiled and replied that he was, and mentioned that she had heard from her dad. She replied that he had been nagging her about getting married for a while. She told Aoba that she had told her father she had a boyfriend on his way to success, and he asked when he would come to meet him. Aoba asked if she had really said that about him. She asserted that it was fine because it was true, but also said that Aoba didn't like this. She asked why he wouldn't come and introduce himself to her parents, since at her age she really should be thinking about marriage. She also said that since Aoba was still young, she wasn't concerned about it. He replied affectionately that if she wanted him to, he would. She smiled and said that, of course, she wanted him to. He loved Naki-chan's smile so much. And he did go to visit her parents because he wanted to do everything for her. He tried his best at work, but then one day, Naki asked him how much longer he was going to live in this apartment. He replied that living there wasn't bad, the rent was cheaper so he could save more. He said he would move out in a year or so when they could afford it. She agreed nonchalantly, and then asked if he planned on staying at his company forever. She mentioned that some people quit their jobs to start their own businesses, and asked if he had ever thought about that. He replied that he hadn't, saying that he was happy with his current job. She said that was so typical of Aoba. Later, while working late, he realized he hadn't had much time for Naki-chan lately. He wondered if she hadn't gone to work that day. In their chat, he messaged her, saying he heard she had taken the day off and asked if something happened. She replied that she had a slight fever that morning. He asked with concern if she was okay and if he should stop by after work. She wrote that it was fine, the fever had gone down. She told him he was tired and didn't need to come visit. He wondered to himself if that was really okay. Naki-chan's fridge was always just full of alcohol, and he thought he should at least bring her some food. When he rang her doorbell, it wasn't Naki but another man who opened the door, looking just as surprised as he was. A cold feeling washed over Miyaki when he saw Naki sitting calmly on the bed, her clothes barely covering her. Later, at a cafe, she asked him if he was being serious, and said that he couldn't just keep going on like this. She told him that Aoba might be fine with it, but she wasn't, and that she wanted to break up. She asked if he didn't see anything wrong with being cheated on. She wondered why he was acting this way, and asked if he was trying to say that he still loved her. In the present moment, he sat silently in front of her, his back slumped, as she asked to give their relationship another chance. He hesitated, then told her that he couldn't. He said that he couldn't start over with Naki-chan, and that there was nothing more he could do for her. Besides, I'm just working part-time right now, and I don't think I can meet your expectations. Naki scrolled through her phone and smiled, saying she was sure Aoba would find a new job quickly. She said that she knew someone who was looking for a systems engineer and had already told them about Aoba, and that they were eager to meet him. Aoba apologized again, causing Naki to pause for a moment, surprised. Then she said she only had one request. She explained that her parents weren't happy to hear they had broken up, especially since he had already met them and everything seemed to be going well. She said her parents had thought they were going to get married, but then he broke up with her. So she asked him to meet her parents again and explain everything. Aoba tried to argue, asking why he had to do that, but Naki clapped her hands, cutting him off, and said she knew he would say that, thanking him in advance. She stood up and said she would contact him about the date for the meeting. When Aoba tried to tell her to wait a minute, she placed a bill on the table, promising to see him again soon before leaving. Aoba stared at the empty chair in front of him, then lowered his head and held it in his hands. He muttered that he was so tired, and wondered what on earth he was doing. He knew that he didn't have to talk to Naki, and that he could have just given her a good reason to leave. If he'd done that, he wouldn't have made Nina-san look at him that way. He looked back at where he was sitting and thought to himself, while I was talking to Naki-chan, my mind kept drifting to Nina. He thought about it and figured it made sense that he was thinking of Nina. Back at home, Nina was hugging her body pillow tightly and shot up when she heard the doorbell ring. She went to open the door and saw him walk in, and he apologized for being late. The look of relief on her face was indescribable as she welcomed him home. She said she thought he might want some more cake, then stepped in front of him and said she hadn't eaten yet. So why don't they have some cake together? He replied that he would eat with her, but his eyes secretly glanced over at Nina's poster. She clutched the key with both hands and asked if it was a spare. She turned to him and asked if she could keep it. He said she could, adding that he knew it must be inconvenient for her not to have a key. He also said that he'd meant to give it to her yesterday, but didn't get the chance. She finished his sentence for him, saying she had fallen asleep first. She said she only remembered up to the part where they were eating cake. He was about to say something about that, but she asked if she'd said anything. He quickly replied that it was nothing special, thinking that she didn't remember her confession. He remembered the look on her face when she confessed her feelings to him. Nina hesitantly started to ask about the woman from before, and he answered that she was just someone he used to date, and that was all. He assured her that there was nothing between them anymore. Then he trailed off again and just said it was nothing, before standing up and saying he was going to do the dishes. She watched him leave in silence, then flopped back onto her body pillow, her face bright red. Standing in front of the sink, He wondered what was wrong with him. At school, a male classmate told Nina that he'd had his eye on her for a long time. Another one said their whole class was about to graduate, and now was the time to make some memories together, model. Another boy shyly said that he would be very happy if they could go out and get to know each other better. Nina, bewildered, asked if this was some kind of punishment game. The boy looked shocked, but she continued, saying this was the third time today she'd heard the same thing. The boy blushed and admitted that while it was true he'd had his eye on her for a while, she was always with that guy from her class. Nina thought of May, as the boy in front of her explained that was why he found it difficult to approach her. May had texted her that he wouldn't be coming today, since he had to meet a classmate and wouldn't be able to walk home with her for a while. Nina realized it was true that she hadn't been with May much lately. The boy in front of her waved his hands awkwardly, saying he didn't mean to confess or anything. He just hoped they could start as friends. Nina smiled and replied that if it was just being friends, then there was no problem. The boy smiled and asked if she knew about the upcoming fireworks festival. She looked at him with curiosity, and he thought to himself that he might have succeeded. He said the fireworks would be on the first Sunday of summer break. Nina exclaimed that it was next week and beamed with a radiant smile, feeling that the fireworks were coming sooner than she had thought. He suggested they exchange contact information, but Nina just thanked him and left, leaving him confused and staring at the empty space before him. At home, Miyake was on the phone with Naki. He said that he didn't like this, and that he never said he would go. He asked if this was really the last time, then agreed if that was the case. He asked about the time and learned that the appointment was for next Sunday. Nina returned home cheerfully, shouting that she was home, and excitedly suggested that they go to the fireworks together. Miyake replied that he would go with her, but asked when the fireworks were. Nina answered that it was next Sunday, which made him pause for a moment and think, next Sunday? What a coincidence. Seeing him quiet, Nina asked if he had other plans, but Miyake replied that it was fine, he would change his plans, since it wasn't urgent. Nina bluntly asked if that appointment was with the woman he had met the other day. Miyake didn't answer, and she looked down saying it was fine. She said that he had promised that woman first, and she was sure there would be other fireworks festivals they could go to together. She told him it wasn't his fault. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the shoulders and shouted that she was wrong. Miyake said that he didn't think he would see that woman again, but promised this would be the last time. He insisted that the appointment wasn't that important, and that he really wanted to go to the fireworks with Nina. Then, he let go of her shoulders and apologized. But Nina took his hand, lacing their fingers together tightly. He looked at their intertwined hands and blushed. She asked if he had to run an errand that day. He confirmed that was the plan. Nina replied that they would meet at the fireworks after he was finished, and that she would wait for him. She continued, saying that on the day of the fireworks, she was going to tell him something. Then she rested her head on his chest, asking him to give her a serious answer. Meanwhile, Yaotome was with his friends. One of them suggested they go see the fireworks next week. Another complained, asking if it was just going to be the guys. A different friend suggested inviting a girl, and they all turned to ask Yaotome if he had any plans for that day. With his eyes still glued to his phone, he replied that he would go, since he was free. The group started discussing which girl to invite. One of them joked that if Yaotome was coming, they might not need to invite anyone else. But to himself, Yaotome thought that he would rather go with the person he actually liked. During his meeting with Naki's parents, her father mentioned that there would be a fireworks show in the area tonight. Naki's father suggested they all go see the fireworks together after the meeting. But Miyake apologized, saying he already had other plans. Her mother replied that it was a shame, while her father said it had been a long time since they were all able to get together like this. He went on, saying he was very surprised when his daughter told him that he had suddenly broken up with her. He apologized for that and admitted that he hadn't even let them know beforehand. Naki's mother laughed and said not to worry about it, adding that she was happy to see the two of them had made up. He looked at her with a confused expression, but she didn't seem to notice. She continued, asking if there had been a lot of misunderstandings before. She expressed how glad she was to have the chance to clear up those misunderstandings. She said that their daughter was old enough to start worrying about settling down and that she felt so relieved when she heard the news that they were getting married. He glanced over at Naki, but she deliberately avoided his gaze.